what was really, really successful for me at the beginning was, I mean, it sounds obvious, but like I would just try and provide as much value as possible to clients in the beginning. And by that, I kind of mean over-delivering, under-promising. And that really worked well for me in terms of getting repeat clients and sort of showing my value to these clients at the beginning.
Welcome to another episode of FrontLiners Podcast. I'm your host, Anuj Raman. On this show, we bring you real entrepreneurs who cut through the BS and share real lessons and strategies that they have learned by operating the business from the front lines. Let's get started. Hey Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Anuj. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. So tell the audience who have not heard about you yet, who are you and what do you do?
Awesome. Yeah, I'm a graphic designer from London. I run a design agency called Design Hammock, and we create visual marketing materials and we offer graphic design support for small or boutique marketing agencies. I was a freelancer before that, and then sort of consolidated all my efforts, my freelance efforts, into a design agency since the end of last year, the beginning of this year. So yeah, it's going well. Thanks.
Awesome. I love that. So how did you get started as a freelance graphic designer?
Yeah, so I graduated from university in London with a degree in graphic design in 2012. And I had a great experience, but I was slightly disillusioned with the idea of going straight into a career in design for a few reasons. But I mean, I kind of wanted to travel and do a few things. So a friend and I actually decided to put off going straight into work in London, and we decided to go and live in Japan for a year and teach English. So we did that and we loved it. And so sort of 1 year turned into 2, which turned to 3, which turned to 4 years. So I actually ended up staying in Tokyo for 4 years in total. And yeah, I mean, I always had this idea in my head of going back into design. It was in the back of my head, and I'd always I love design, and I'd always wanted to go back into it. And during my time, I was doing various bits and pieces of design along the way in Tokyo. But then what happened was, it was sort of the beginning of the 3rd year in Tokyo. My friend and I decided to try and start a business there, which didn't really end up taking off. But because we were designing the website and we started looking at SEO, marketing and other things like that, for me, that's kind of what started to get the ball rolling in terms of me thinking like, oh yeah, maybe I want to start a business and maybe I want to do my own thing. And because of that experience, the seed was kind of planted in my head. So I think it was a few months after that I came across, a website and a blog run by a guy named Danny Margulies, which was called Freelance to Win. And that was kind of really inspirational. Yeah,
Secrets of Six-Figure Upworker, I guess. That's what his course is called?
Yeah. So he runs a blog and he has a course and stuff that on his website, Freelance to Win, which is basically talks about freelancing and using, freelancing, but specifically Upwork but various other aspects of freelancing. But it was really inspirational for me to read, because it was about these people who had designed freelance businesses and sort of travel the world. And I was kind of coming to that realization that that's what I wanted to do. So what I ended up doing actually was, I was poring over his content and reading about it and getting really inspired. So what I ended up doing is I did end up taking his course, which was really useful for me. And I started to develop a design portfolio, because I had that realization that, yeah, that's kind of what I want to do. And that's what I was good at. It's what I was trained at. So I started to develop my portfolio, taking his course and learning about Upwork and learning about freelancing and stuff. And at the start, I was still, during the days, it was at the beginning, I was still working as an English teacher, and then coming back and developing my portfolio and working on client jobs in the evening, which was, a lot of hustle at the beginning. But then it was around May 2017 that I quit teaching and went full time with freelancing, as I'd started to build up a small client base by then. Until around the beginning of 2018, so January 2018, when I eventually left Tokyo, and I've been traveling ever since, really building my business. But yeah, that's pretty much how I got started. It kind of snowballed from this idea of me and my friends starting this business, and it kind of snowballed to me realizing that, yeah, that's what I want to do. And then taking this course and being inspired by all these stories of freelancing. And then going into design. So yeah, that's kind of how I started.
Wow. So you mentioned Upwork back, what you were saying. So tell me a little bit about what were those earlier projects? And I'm assuming that Upwork was the first platform that you got your clients from. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was the first. That was my entry into freelance design, actually. So it was, for me, as you know, like sort of finding clients is one of the big questions that people starting out freelancing have. I mean, I'm sure you've had it yourself, right? You know,
yes,
how do
I
I
have.
find clients? And yeah, exactly. You know, how do I find clients and how do I start in this freelancing stuff? So like for me, I went straight into Upwork. I'd done a few bits and pieces for friends in Tokyo and stuff like that. But yeah,
So
I went
you mean
straight into Upwork.
like some free work just to get the momentum going. So you started doing some free work, and yeah,
that kind of thing. And a couple of free things and a couple of paid things. And I was also, working on developing my portfolio myself. But from this course, I sort of realized that I needed to develop a niche to make myself stand out. So I was as I was working up to starting freelance properly, developing a portfolio and going on Upwork and searching for jobs, I'd done a fair amount of reading and research about becoming freelance. And it was really clear, it was really apparent that having a defined niche was a really good way to position yourself as a designer instead of just being a generalist designer, which I'm sure you can attest to with what you do with LinkedIn as well,
Yes, exactly. You're exactly right. So like the positioning stuff, let's talk about what market gap did you find when you entered let's say you entered the graphic design industry, right? And you are like a one or two in, and now you're starting to get actual work from Upwork. So what is it that you kind of found is a market need in the graphic design industry right now, which you were trying to kind of fulfill or trying to overcome? What was that market need, do you think? And how did you position yourself to fulfill that market need?
Yeah, sure. So like for me, what I ended up doing before I'd even I had a portfolio with various, some graphic design portfolio. And what I ended up doing was going to these freelance sites and just searching for jobs that had the word graphic design in them, pretty much just had the word graphic design with them. And just sort of like writing down what I noticed and writing down where there was a need for design and stuff. And what I noticed was, well, one, there was a lot of need for logos and branding, which for me wasn't really something that I was too interested in or thought that would suit me. And two, there were a lot of jobs for web design, which was something that I had a bit of experience with. As I said, I designed this website for this business we tried. But again, it was just something that I didn't think that's for me. But then I kept seeing jobs pop up for infographics and visual content for blogs and that kind of thing. And I looked into that a bit more. And it seemed like a lot of these things had an ongoing capacity to them, which I really liked, which things like, with logo design and branding, that kind of stuff, there's not always an ongoing capacity. And what I noticed about infographics as well was that they utilize various aspects of design, including illustration, which was something that I really liked and was good at. So at the beginning, I was just I just decided to put my focus, at least for the time being, on creating infographics for clients. And yeah, that was my focus at the beginning. So I started applying to jobs, and that was the beginning point for me.
So Ben, you told me that you were freelancing for a little bit, and then how did you go from transitioning from a freelancer to a graphic design agency? What did that look like, and why did you do it?
Sure, yeah, great question. So I was freelancing for a few years, and I'd got to the point where, I'd started working for a lot of different clients with the infographics, and it had started to snowball, and I'd started to do a lot of marketing materials, ebooks, white papers, social ads, all that kind of stuff. And, you get referrals and you get clients again and that kind of thing. And so while I was freelancing, I had done some work for a client in Australia who was working on her PhD. And it was a really interesting project. And I'd created an infographic for her that was basically a visualization of her key research points for her PhD thesis. And the infographic turned out to be really, really successful. And she used it extensively for her PhD research. And like a little while later, she approached me to collaborate. And she asked me if I wanted to collaborate on a small business that offered this same service of creating infographics for academic researchers and scientists who wanted to share their research in a more accessible way. And we did that for a while and had a bit of success, but it became clear that even though we had a valuable service, a lot of people didn't necessarily see the need for it. So it became quite hard to market. But at the time, as I said, I was working with a lot of marketing clients, creating marketing materials. And I was also working with some bigger companies. And I was starting to not really enjoy working with some of these bigger companies due to the, you know what it's like with big companies. There's communication issues.
Yeah, a lot of communication lags. Yeah. They take a lot of time.
Communication lags, indecision, and that kind of thing. And what I realized was the clients who I liked working with the most were these smaller marketing agencies who needed a lot of ongoing design work. And so after a couple of years of freelancing, or a few years of freelancing, I'd realized that I kind of niched what I was doing even further, which was graphic designs and graphic design materials, graphic design support for these smaller marketing agencies. And then at the time, so this was last year, I was beginning to think that I wanted to scale. And it was a pretty natural step for me to consolidate what I was doing into an agency with a focus on creating marketing materials and offering graphic design support for these small marketing agencies who I really enjoyed working with. So yeah, Design Hammock kind of came out of this idea of me identifying that there was a market for these specific design services I was offering, and also the desire to grow my business. So yeah, I launched Design Hammock earlier this year, and it's been really great so far. But I think the kind of the moral or the story would be like, I had we tried this business in Tokyo, it failed. I had this agency with the academic clients, which kind of failed. And it sort of pushed me further towards what I'm doing now, because you learn something new every time something doesn't work and something that does work. And yeah, you can grow from each of these failures. So for me, that's kind of how it came about. With Design Hammock, yeah.
That's great. I mean, one thing you mentioned there is the way you transition from being a freelancer, then you got that PhD work, and then you realize that you need to really address this need of the market, and that's when you transition into an agency. I kind of have a similar story. So this is like, I read the book Jason Fried, Rework. I'm not sure if you have heard of it. Have you heard of it, Rework?
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. So they mentioned this concept of which is called scratching your own itch. So when I started out, I was trying to start with Facebook advertising services, as most people do. So I was starting out locally. Then I realized very early on that there's kind of a problem. I can't find clients for myself. So that's when I stumbled upon the whole LinkedIn lead generation thing, as you already know. And that's what you did similarly, a little bit along the same lines. That's what you did. And you kind of slowly transitioned by doing a little bit of work, and then slowly transitioning into the agency model.
Yeah, great. Absolutely. I think, as you said, it comes down to this need, or this identification that there is a market need for what you're doing. And I think that when you've identified that and you have a very strong like identification that is the direction you're going, paired with the idea that you want to grow, then I think it becomes natural that it becomes an agency model.
So when you started off as a freelancer, you did some free work, and then you did that course of Danny Margulies, and then you got started on Upwork. Now, the thing about Upwork is it requires a profile, it requires you to position yourself, and it requires to write cover letters and proposals. I think it's cover letters to send out to prospects, which is very similar to what we do on LinkedIn. Like, you've got to have an optimized profile.
Yeah,
and
totally.
And when I looked at your profile on LinkedIn, it was very crystal clear to me, like exactly what you do, how you position, who you're trying to serve. And I guess that came from how you positioned yourself on Upwork. So I would like to get your views. I would like to get your tips. Like, how did you position yourself on Upwork? And how should one go about writing their profile? Not just on Upwork, but in general principles that they could use to optimize their LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, great point about, I think any social profile that you have, which is geared or aimed towards finding work or finding clients, you've really got to position yourself from the point of view of the client, So I'm sure, like that means speaking to the client's pain points and, not talking about yourself pretty much, I think what I saw when I was writing my Upwork proposal was that a lot of people would just start it with how long they've been freelancing, how long they've been designing, how long they've been a web designer or the companies they work with and that kind of thing. And of course your experience has a place, but at the same time, that doesn't address the needs of your target audience. It doesn't make it completely clear exactly what your values are, or exactly how you can fix their problems, or exactly how you can help them reach their goals. So I think with Upwork, one way that I was, I could set myself apart was just not really talking about myself. It was talking about how I could help the clients.
Right.
And the value that I could provide to my clients, and making it very clear exactly what I did. And then backing that up with social proof, I think was quite a powerful thing for me. So yeah, I kind of ignored that whole thing of that, that regular resume or CV thing where you talk about, oh, I've got ABC experience with ABC.
Yeah, it's totally me-centered profile.
Yeah. So basically that's it. Yeah, you said it right. Make the profile, whatever it be, Upwork or LinkedIn, make it completely to do with how you can help your client or help your target audience,
One of the things that you said earlier is that when you approached any client on Upwork, what you did was you went from a position of adding value to the person. And how did that manifest into the cover letters that you were sending to your clients? Like, how did you structure those cover letters to show that you are unique? First of all, your profile did that. How did you go about pitching yourself, or let's say putting yourself in front of the projects that people were putting on Upwork?
Sure. I mean, one way that I would start all proposals would be, just trying to talk to them like a human being and trying to connect with them from the get-go, which would mean reading the job post very, very, very carefully and seeing if there's anything that I could use to connect with this client instantly. So,
Wow.
Just as a stupid, they might say something about like, they need an infographic for their website about dogs or something like that. And then that would maybe be a good start point to create a conversation when you're first applying for these jobs. And secondly, I think what I would try and do, if I could, would be to research the company or research their past jobs and see if there's anything that they take value in, and then I can use that in my proposal as well. And I would never really talk about myself. What I would try and do is to show the client, something similar that I'd worked on before and how it had been successful for this past client, so it can build trust with them. So that's something that's worked quite well for me. And, taking them through a step-by-step process of how you can create success for them. And then finally, the final thing that I would always do was sign off with asking them to connect, pretty much, So that I'd say at the end of all the proposals, I'd say, just send me a message, click the green button to connect or something like that. I think it's probably changed on Upwork now, but it just gives people a call to action, which is quite simple. And they know exactly what to do then. So yeah, all those kind of things really helped at the beginning. It's just, and it's also what I would do is use their language as well. I wouldn't say I would say, you. So all these things kind of help to get proposals to write proposals that are successful. Yeah.
It's fascinating, like the way you scored jobs, like projects on Upwork. It's fascinating because the same principles apply to LinkedIn. Because at the end of the day, even on LinkedIn, you're just talking to a human being. And the things you mentioned, like showing a common ground, like reading the job profile, like whatever job description, and finding something common to relate to, and mirroring like whatever they're saying it in the same way, and putting call to actions. All those things apply to the LinkedIn world. I mean, just the medium, but the principles still remain the same, which is a great thing.
Yeah, and I think what I did actually, which was really helpful for me, I became a client on Upwork, and I sent out, I put a job post up, and I read the proposals that I got, and then I sort of analyzed the ones that stood out to me, and the ones that stood out to me used all these kind of tactics. They said, hey Ben, or they said something about the job post that I'd specifically talked about, and they addressed my goals. And the ones, it was crazy to see, because it was 80-90% of the proposals I got would just seem like copy paste proposals, which is an awful way to do things, but it's not personalized in the slightest. So yeah, that was a really interesting step for me as well, actually, to go and actually post a job and see the responses and analyze the responses that I found interesting, or that, piqued my interest. So that was another interesting thing to look at as well.
That's a great point. I mean, knowing exactly what your customer is going through, like the buyer's journey in the marketing terms, like knowing exactly what the buyer feels when you pitch them and how it exactly feels, and getting that information, and then seeing what works, like, is this relevant? Is it really good to do to someone you're pitching to? That perspective that you mentioned, like turning into a buyer instead of a seller, that perspective gives you a really good idea of how to talk sensibly to a buyer who is looking for someone to do their job. That's a great point.
Yeah, totally. And it was, that was really valuable for me to see that side of things as a buyer, not a seller. And so that also, helped me to tweak my approach when it came to sending proposals and that kind of thing. But yeah, now it's all down to, we've got it down now, and we pretty much just try and possibly can.
Wow, that's awesome. So talking about like your experience so far in the graphic design industry, I would like to know, like, what are some things that you have seen that a beginner, like, let's say, for example, I'm a beginner and I'm entering the graphic design industry. What do you think should be my ways of those initial clients to build that momentum and get the ball going? What would you recommend to someone like me who's just starting out?
So, as I said, I've been doing it for a while now, and I think when I first started, as I said, let's go back. I mean, with the infographics, what I started doing was I was getting a lot of repeat clients, and they were asking me now. They started asking me for other things. So they started asking me for ebooks, or they started asking me to do display ads or social creative, so that kind of thing. But the first thing I'd say well, the first thing that I did even was to identify a niche, or like, by that I mean identify where there is a need for a specific service, and just get really good at doing that. So like, for example, if you're a logo designer, that's a pretty broad design service. So you might go and position yourself as someone who does, I don't know, modern geometric logo designs, because then you're going to stand out to someone who's looking for that service instead of being a generalist. So you're going to stand out. And secondly,
yeah, please go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say that secondly, like, what was really, really successful for me at the beginning was, I mean, it sounds obvious, but like, I would just try and provide as much value as possible to clients in the beginning. And by that, I kind of mean over-delivering, under-promising. So as an example, for me at the beginning, when I was creating infographics, I'd always try and get the work done before the due date. And with infographics, I'd also create a little something extra. For example, like, I'd also create a social media image, or I'd create a blog header for the infographic or something. So they had something extra to share. And that really worked well for me in terms of getting repeat clients and sort of showing my value to these clients at the beginning.
Well, so two very important points you just made. So the first one was about like not being a generalist. And I know you've been emphasizing this a lot. And this is really important and needs to be emphasized, because being a generalist usually means you're not actually targeting anyone. Let's take it for the lead generation example. When you're running campaigns or you're trying to target a particular market segment, it's very broad and it's very hard to stand out from the crowd. And what you said is like about the logo design example, which was a great example. And you said like, don't be general, specialize in one particular thing and get better at it every single day. And again, the second thing you said, which is universally true in any business, if you can add more value to your clients, whoever you're trying to serve, and as you said, what you did was you over-delivered and you under-promised. You did your work 2 days before the due date. And those things, those little things obviously give you an upper edge, and it shows value. The client finds it really valuable and finds you as a great person to work with. Those are really great examples. Yes, please go on.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Yeah, like it's something that worked really well with me at the beginning. When I was looking for clients in the beginning, I was applying to a lot of jobs, you know what I mean? So all the jobs I could get. And one really valuable thing that I learned and actually got me a lot of jobs in the beginning was that idea of positioning myself properly in a niche. And like, as I said, back to this course that I took, I learned how to set myself apart in proposals and offer real value to clients. So that's another thing that I recommend as well. Like, instead of talking about yourself, talk about their goals and talk about what they want to achieve and the steps that you can take together to achieve the goals for the client. And I mean, look, you could do a whole podcast about proposals and Upwork and that kind of thing, but that was really valuable for me when I started applying to jobs and I started looking for work. It got me a lot of like that approach got me a lot of jobs in the beginning. But yeah, and I guess like another thing that I'd say is when you get these jobs, you just have to be a good person to work with, you know. Like, people are always going to want to work with someone who communicates well, responds quickly, or who doesn't need micromanaging or chasing up. And I think when you start to develop that relationship, or you develop that, you develop trust with the client, which is super important. And I think that goes both ways, really. I mean, I have clients who I absolutely love working with and catching up with, and the communication is great, and it makes the whole working experience really enjoyable.
Yes, definitely. So one thing that is in my mind right now is that when you started on Upwork, there's the way people differentiate you is based on your pricing. Like, there's hourly rate you can charge, there's you can charge per project. So when you started out, or even now, like for Design Hammock, what are your thoughts on pricing? Like, what are your thoughts on pricing? Like, how do you price your services? How should anyone in the graphic design industry, do you model someone who prices, or what are your views? Is it like on hourly basis, or do you do it per project basis? I would like to get your views on that.
Yeah, sure. So for me, when I first started out, I was doing a lot of hourly work. I mean, like Upwork, there's a lot of hourly work and there's fixed rate projects too, but I was doing a lot of hourly work in the beginning. And for me, what happened was, I was doing a lot of hourly work and it was fine and I enjoyed it. And I thought, for when I was starting out, it was a good way of working. So for me, like, I just had an experience where I was working with a client on an hourly basis who started saying that the work I was producing shouldn't have taken as long as it should have, which wasn't true. It was nonsense, because it was a set of icons that had taken 4 hours or something, which was reasonable at the time. And then from then I started thinking about pricing a bit more, and I started taking on a few more projects, which were also quite good. And then I started to hire a few hourly contractors to help me with some projects later on when I was freelancing. And I felt like sometimes they maybe started taking advantage of the hourly model I'd hired them on. And so when I actually started Design Hammock, I started thinking about pricing in a lot more detail, and I came to the conclusion that I think the hourly model is generally quite flawed, because I think it ties performance to outputs instead of outcomes. And also at the time I was doing some monthly retainers, which were good, which were, valuable for me, valuable for the client, but sometimes I felt that the clients wouldn't get the best ROI that they could get because the needs changed from month to month. So with Design Hammock, I decided instead of an hourly retainer that we would move to a value-based system, which allows us to focus on needs, goals, and deliverables. And it allows our clients to budget design work much more efficiently, instead of doing an hourly contract or a retainer contract, because needs change from month to month and needs change. So basically what we do at Design Hammock is we use a point system where you can buy points as a one-off purchase, so for one-off projects, or you can get a discount when you buy points in bulk.
Wow, that's interesting.
So like these, for us, we've put on this, so these don't have an expiry when you buy them. So it's not like a retainer. You'd buy 30 points or 40 points, and when you buy them, they don't have an expiry. So you use them whenever you need design work. And then with that, we have a table that lists our deliverables and how many points you need to complete a deliverable. So for us, we've worked that out. It gives a great ROI for our clients, and means that they don't waste money on retainers or hourly work that's moving slowly. So, I mean, yeah, for us, it means that, like the clients are paying for results and tangible deliverables rather than for the effort, or rather than for the time. It might seem complicated, but it's not really. But it's it's been quite effective for us.
But the point thing, it makes a lot of sense. You were telling about the point system. I haven't anywhere before seen that anyone implement this kind of a point system. So how did you come up with that idea? I'm curious.
I was doing some reading, or I was reading an article about the pricing systems, and I came across, I can't remember where it was now, but I came across, I think it was a marketing agency who was using this points pricing system. And it just, for me, something clicked and it made a lot of sense. So I tried it out with a couple of clients, and it was really good. So like, for example, they would buy a set of, they thought they maybe needed, I don't know, a certain amount of design work in 1 month. But you know how these things work with design.
Exactly.
End up in 2 months. So instead of like applying a retainer or applying an hourly model, we just said, look, if you buy say 30 points from us, then you can use them whenever you need them. So it kind of worked out really well in that sense, because it didn't tie them down to a long-term contract that 1 month they're not using design services. And it also didn't tie them down to an hourly model, which was not getting the best return on investment for them. So yeah, in terms of where I found it, something clicked for me when I read that article, and I started researching more about the point system, and it kind of went from there really.
That was totally unique. Like I haven't seen anyone do that before. So that's great. That's good to know.
Yeah, exactly. So like kind of what I say, well, the way we position ourselves for Design Hammock, the agency, we basically we want to be, you know, their outsourced design department for their everyday design needs. You know, so we want to be this sort of a dependable. Well, we strive to be this a dependable design department. You know, small marketing agencies, a lot of the time, small content marketing agencies, small SEO agencies, small and boutique marketing agencies don't have, you know, design teams. So what we strive to do, and that's sort of how we position ourselves, is, you know, we like to become an extension of their team and basically become their outsourced design department. So we can take care of the design needs for them without them having to worry about sort of messing around in Photoshop or, you know, scrolling through a list of Upwork proposals and that kind of thing. So that's kind of how we ended up positioning ourselves.
Well, this has all been great, Ben. Tell us about how should people reach out to you?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me on. It's been a lot of fun talking about design and freelancing, the transition between freelance and entrepreneur. And now with Design Hammock, we're still looking at new clients and hoping to connect with like-minded clients. So you can reach out to us at designhammock.agency. So that's our website, or reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. You know, I'm active on LinkedIn. That would be the best, yeah. Or if you want to email me, send me an email at ben@designhammock.agency. So, yeah, get in touch.
Yes, so it's design HAMMOCK.agency, and you can get in touch with Ben on Ben at Ben Brockbank, like linkedin.com/IN/BENBROCKPANK. That's how you can get in touch with Ben Brockbank. Thank you for coming on the show, Ben. It was a whole lot of fun. We covered a lot of topics here, and it was just nice talking to you.
Great stuff, man. Thanks for having me.